Welcome to Love and Tears, the place where we uncover the deepest, most forbidden corners of human emotions. If you're someone who loves stories that are raw-gripping and filled with unforgettable intensity, then make sure to hit the like button, leave us a comment, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world and allows us to keep sharing stories that touch the heart and stir the soul. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Now let's dive into today's story. That night became the most intense, unforgettable night of my life. It all started on a calm Thursday evening. I lay on my back, staring at the faint patterns the moonlight painted across the ceiling, moonlight casting soft shapes on the ceiling. My thoughts scattered and restless. I felt a deep loneliness creeping in my husband. Thomas had been away on an extended business trip and wouldn't return for another 2 months. It had already been 3 weeks since I last saw him. The stillness of the night was broken by the soft creak of the bedroom door, and I suddenly realized I wasn't alone, sitting up slightly. I squinted at the faint figure standing in the doorway. My 19-year-old son Ethan was there, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the dim glow from the hallway. He paused, gripping the doorframe tightly, as though anchoring himself, he said softly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I rubbed my eyes, my chest tightening at the sound of his voice. "Ethan, what's wrong?" I asked, concern lacing my words. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood, frozen, his shadow stretching across the room, the weight of his presence heavy in the air. Finally, he stepped inside, his bare feet making muted thuds against the carpet. There was a hesitation in the way he moved, cautious, almost wary, that made the atmosphere in the room feel even more charged. "I couldn't sleep," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I glanced over at the clock on my nightstand, 2:14 a.m. Ethan wasn't one to disturb me unless something serious was on his mind. My chest tightened further as I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and motioned for him to come closer. "What's going on?" I asked softly. He hesitated again before finally sitting down on the edge of the bed. His posture was rigid, his hands tightly clasped in his lap, as though bracing himself for whatever he was about to say. I watched him waiting, but his gaze remained fixed on the carpeted floor, the tension radiating from him almost palpable. "Ethan, you can talk to me," I said softly. "Whatever it is, I'm here." He exhaled a shaky breath, his fingers nervously tugging at the hem of his t-shirt. It's hard to explain," he said at last. "I've been feeling something different, and I don't know what to do about it." His words sent a ripple of unease through me. Leaning forward slightly, I tried to keep my voice steady, despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "Different?" How I asked. That's when he looked at me, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity I wasn't prepared for. "It's about someone," he admitted, his voice quiet, but charged. "Someone I've been thinking about a lot. Someone you wouldn't expect." Relief briefly washed over me as I assumed this might be about a girl, a crush at school, perhaps that he didn't know how to navigate. Ethan had always been shy about his feelings, keeping them bottled up until they reached a boiling point. "Okay," I said, offering a reassuring smile. "Who is it? Someone from school?" He shook his head quickly, his gaze dropping again. "No," he murmured, his voice barely audible. It's not someone from school, then, who I pressed gently. Though a strange sense of unease was beginning to creep into my chest. Ethan, you can tell me whatever it is. We'll figure it out. He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling heavily, as though he was summoning every bit of courage he had when he finally spoke. Again his voice trembled. "It's you, Mom," he said, the words hanging heavy in the air. "It's always been you?" His confession hit me like a tidal with wave, knocking the air from my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't think. My mind raced to process what he had just said, but the sheer weight of his words left me stunned. Ethan, I managed my voice, faltering, What are you saying?" He stood abruptly, pacing the room like a restless animal, his hands tugging at his hair as though trying to pull the words from his mind. "I know how it sounds," Ethan said quickly. "I know wrong, but I can't help it. I've tried. God, I've tried for so long to push it away, to ignore it, but it's always there." I stared at him, my heart pounding so loudly that his words seemed distant. "Ethan, this isn't... Don't tell me, it's not real," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "You know what I feel? I've never felt this way about anyone else. It's not admiration or some stupid crush. It's something way deeper." "Mom, Ethan," I said again, my voice trembling. "You're my son? What you're feeling, it's not love. It's something else. It is love," he shouted, his voice raw with emotion. "You're everything to me, Mom. You're the only one who's ever understood me. The only one who's ever made me feel like I'm worth something. How can that not be love?" Tears stung my eyes as I struggled to process his words. My son, my sweet boy who I had raised and loved unconditionally, was pouring out emotions I couldn't comprehend, feelings I couldn't reciprocate, and yet, deep within me, there was a spark of something I didn't want to acknowledge. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak. "Ethan, you're confused. You're going through a lot right now. And maybe these feelings..." "I'm not confused," he said, turning to face me. His eyes were glassy with unshed tears, his jaw set with a determination that made my chest ache. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. For a moment, I hesitated. I could see it, the way he looked at me, the way his feelings for me went beyond what they should. And though I didn't want to admit it, a part of me felt drawn to it. But I was his mother, and I knew I had a responsibility to ignore what I was feeling. No matter how complicated it was, I reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Ethan," I said gently, "these feelings, they'll pass. I promise you, they'll pass, and when they do, you'll see things more clearly." "What if they don't?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "What if this is who I am? What if this is how I'm supposed to feel?" My throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't find the words to answer. I couldn't speak. I didn't have the answers Ethan was searching for, didn't know how to ease the pain that was so evident in his eyes. All I could do was hold on to the hope that time would bring clarity, that this moment wouldn't define us. "You're not alone in this," I said, finally, my voice trembling, but resolute. "We'll get through it." Ethan, together, he looked at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a vulnerability that made my heart ache. "I don't want to lose you, Mom," he said softly. "I can't lose you, you won't," I said firmly, squeezing his arm no matter what. "I'll always be here for you." I paused, then added, "You know what, why don't you stay with me tonight? Maybe it'll help." I shifted under the covers, making room for him. He nodded hesitantly and stepped into the bed as he lay down. I instinctively wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. In that moment, I felt something I didn't dare acknowledge. Aloud instead, I simply said, "Good night, sweetie." He smiled faintly, and the silence that followed was heavy, but not unbearable. It was a silence filled with unspoken promises, fragile yet sincere. As he closed his eyes, I felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that we could weather this storm, no matter how impossible it seemed. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I was right. A night like this would come again, one that would unfold in a completely different way. This night, nothing happened, but I knew more was on the horizon. Love, especially a love as complicated as this, doesn't simply fade quietly. It demanded to be reckoned with. And I had no idea what that reckoning would look like. The morning after Ethan's confession felt surreal. The usual quiet of the house, which once brought comfort, now pressed down on me like a suffocating weight. Every corner, every familiar object seemed to hum with the unspoken tension between us. I busied myself with chores, hoping that the routine would help ground me. But my hands trembled as I folded laundry, and my mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. What did this mean for us, for him, for me? The sudden clatter of a chair in the kitchen jolted me from my thoughts. Ethan was sitting at the table, staring into a bowl of cereal, as untouched as the coffee sit cold on the counter. His hair was disheveled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He hadn't slept, and neither had I. Morning, I said cautiously. Breaking the heavy silence, he looked up, his expression unreadable. "Morning," he replied, his voice horror. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, the sound of the liquid hitting the mug, louder than it should have been. Sitting across from him, the distance between us felt both too far and too close for a long moment. Neither of us spoke, the air thick with everything unsaid. Finally, I broke the silence. "Ethan, about last night, I meant what I said," he interrupted, his voice steady, despite the turmoil in his eyes. "I'm not going to pretend I didn't." I closed my eyes briefly, willing myself to stay calm. "I know you're being honest," I said softly. "But Ethan, what you're feeling, it's not something we can act on. It's not something we should act on." He leaned back in his chair, his hands gripping the edge of the table tightly. "Why not?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "Why does love have to fit into rules and boundaries? Isn't love supposed to be free?" I took a deep breath, searching for the right words, knowing that none would truly satisfy either of us. The right words: love isn't just about what we feel. "Ethan," I said softly, "it's about what's right, what's good for everyone involved. And what you're saying, it could hurt us both." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly. "That's the last thing I want," I know I said, reaching across the table to place a hand over his. "And I don't want to hurt you either. That's why we have to handle this carefully. We need to find a way to move past this." His fingers tightened around mine, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who'd clung to my hand when he was scared, who'd looked to me for guidance and comfort. But this was different. The way he looked at me now was different. "I don't know if I can move past it," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'll try for you." Tears welled in my eyes as I gave his hand a gentle squeeze. That's all I asked the days that followed, with a blur of awkward conversations. And forced normally, Ethan tried to keep his distance, retreating to his room or spending long hours out of the house. I told myself it was for the best, that the space would help him sort through his feelings. But I missed him. I missed the easy rapport we'd shared before everything had changed. Even though he tried to avoid me during the day, we still shared the same bed at night. Yet, despite the closeness, felt a growing distance between us one evening. As I was preparing dinner, I heard the front door open and close. Ethan stepped into the kitchen, his hair damp from the rain. He looked at me for a long moment, as if debating whether to say something. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "You're just in time. Dinner's almost ready." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked over to the counter and leaned against it, his arms crossed. "I've been thinking," Ethan said. "Finally." I turned off the stove and faced him, my heart pounding about, "What about us?" He said, his gaze steady about what I said that night. I swallowed hard, bracing myself. I knew exactly what night he meant. "Ethan, I thought we agreed." I know he interrupted his tone, calm but insistent, and I'm not here to argue. I need to say this. I nodded, motioning for him to continue. "I've been trying to figure out what to do with these feelings." He said, his voice low but firm, and I realized something. I don't want to lose what we have, Mom. Even if it's not what I want it to be. I'd rather have you in my life as my mom than risk losing you completely. Relief washed over me, tempered by the sadness in his voice. "Ethan, you're not going to lose me," I said, my voice steady. "No matter what, I'll always be here for you." He nodded, his lips pressing into a thin line. "I know. But it's hard. It's really hard." I stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "It's gonna take time," I said gently. "But you're strong, Ethan, and I'll help you through this. However I can." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the tension between us seemed to ease. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly. "That means a lot." We stood there in the kitchen, the rain tapping against the windows. For the first time in days, I felt like we were going to be okay. But life has a way of complicating things. When you least expect it, just when I thought we'd found some semblance of peace, something happened, something that threatened to unravel everything. The uneasy truce Ethan and I had established held for a time fragile, but functional. He made an effort to smile, more laugh at my jokes, and join me for meals like he used to. I clung to those moments, trying to convince myself that things were improving. But late at night, when the house was silent and I was alone with my thoughts, the weight of his confession lingered one evening. After a long day at work, I found Ethan in the living room. He was sitting on the couch, staring in blankly at the TV. An old sitcom played in the background, its laugh track echoing awkwardly in the otherwise quiet room. He looked up as I walked in, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" I asked, sitting down beside him. He shrugged. "Yeah, just thinking." I hesitated before speaking about anything in particular. He let out a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. What am I not thinking about this? My stomach twisted. "Ethan, I thought we were moving past this." "I'm trying," he said quickly. "I really am. But it's not that simple. You can't just turn feelings off like a switch." I know I said softly, and I don't expect you to, but we have to keep working on this for both our sakes. He turned to me, then his eyes searching mine. Have you ever thought about it? He asked suddenly, his voice about us, about what it would be like if things were different. I froze his question, catching me completely off guard. Ethan? I don't lie to me, he said, his tone more pleading than demanding. Just tell me the truth. I looked away, my thoughts racing. The truth was complicated, tangled in emotions I didn't fully understand. Of course I'd thought about it. How could I not? Not after what he'd said, but acknowledging those thoughts, even to myself, felt like crossing a line. I couldn't uncross. It doesn't matter what I've thought, I said, finally forcing my voice to remain steady. What matters is doing the right thing, and this isn't right. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know you think that, but what if... No, Ethan, I said firmly. Cutting him off, there is no. What if we're not going to have this conversation? He stared at me for a long moment, his expression a mixture of frustration and sadness. You're scared, he said finally. Yes, I am, I admitted, because this isn't just about you or me. It's about everything we've built, everything we stand to lose, but I was lying. He was right, I was scared. But not for the reason he thought. I was scared to tell him that over the past few days, I'd started feeling something too. Something I didn't know how to face, let alone admit he didn't respond, and the silence that followed was deafening. Finally, he stood his movements, stiff and deliberate. I'm going for a walk, he said, heading for the door. Ethan, I began, but he was already gone. The hours passed slowly, each minute, dragging like an eternity. I sat by the window, watching the street, my worry mounting with every moment. Ethan didn't return. It wasn't until nearly midnight that I finally heard the door open. I rushed to the entryway, relief flooding through me as I saw him step inside, soaked from the rain. Ethan, where have you been? I asked, my voice trembling. Walking, he said, simply, shaking the water from his hair, grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to him. You're going to get sick, I said, my worries spilling over as irritation. You can't just disappear like that, he sighed, running the towel over his face. I needed to clear my head, and did it help? I asked, crossing my arms. He looked at me, then his eyes dark and unreadable. Not really. Something in his tone made me falter. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Ethan, we can't keep going like this. It's tearing us both apart. I know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know how to stop. Maybe we need help. I suggested someone to talk to a therapist. His lips twisted into a bitter smile. You think a therapist is going to understand this? They might, I said, though. I wasn't sure I believed it myself, or at least help us figure out how to move forward. He shook his head, the towel slipping from his hands and dropping to the floor. No one can fix this, Mom. No one can change how I feel. His words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but I couldn't, because deep down I knew he was right. The worst part was that I still hadn't told him the truth, that I felt something too. That night his confession had stirred emotions in me. I was trying desperately to deny I was lying to him, to myself, trying to bury feelings I didn't want to face. At least for now, the days that followed were a blur of avoidance and awkward conversations. Ethan tried to act normal, but the tension between us was palpable. Every interaction felt like walking on a tightrope, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to snap. That moment came one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. Ethan had been unusually quiet all day. his movements tense and deliberate. As I loaded the dishwasher, he leaned against the counter watching me. "Mom," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "I need to tell you something." I turned to face him, my heart pounding, my heart pounded. "What is it?" "I can't do this anymore," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "Can't keep pretending everything's fine, Ethan. We've talked about this." I began, but he shook his head, cutting me off. "No, you don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "I can't just turn off how I feel. I can't keep pretending I'm okay when I'm not." "Then what do you want me to do?" I asked, my frustration bubbling over. "What do you expect me to say?" "I don't know," he said, his voice cracking. I need you to see me, to understand how much this is tearing me apart." "I do see you," I said, my own voice trembling. "Now I see you every day, Ethan, and it breaks my heart to see you like this. But I don't know how to fix it." He took a step closer, his eyes locking onto mine. "You can't fix it," he said quietly. "But maybe we don't have to." I stared at him, my mind reeling. "Ethan, what are you saying?" He didn't answer. Instead, he closed the distance between us, his hand brushing against mine. My breath caught the air between us, suddenly electric. But the moment didn't last. I stepped back, breaking the connection. "No," I said firmly, my voice shaking. We can't." His face crumpled, pain etched into every line. "I'm sorry," he whispered, turning and walking away. I stood there, my heart racing, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me, because no matter how much I tried to it, something inside me had responded to him. And that terrified me more than anything. I thought back to the nights we had spent together, the way his touch had lingered. More and more, I noticed. And deep down, I knew he had to. Maybe that's why he had started this conversation. But the days after, that moment in the kitchen felt like navigating a storm, unpredictable and overwhelming. Ethan and I avoided each other more than ever. When we did cross paths, the silence between us spoke louder than any words could. I told myself it was for the best, that the space was what we both needed. But the truth was, every time I saw Ethan retreat to his room, every time I caught the flash of pain in his eyes, it tore at me. I spent countless nights replaying that scene over and over, the way he looked at me, the weight of his words, and the way my heart had betrayed me in that brief, fleeting moment of connection. It wasn't right. It couldn't be, but denying the complexity of what we were both feeling only seemed to deepen the wound. One evening, as I sat in the living room with a book lying forgotten in my lap, Ethan walked in. He hesitated at the doorway, as if unsure whether he was welcome. His hair was messy, his expression guarded. This was the moment I had to confess, to tell him what I felt. "Ethan," I said, finally, my voice quieter than usual. He looked up his face, cautious, as he tried to keep his expression neutral. "Hey," he replied softly. "What's up?" He stepped further into the room, but didn't sit pacing slowly near the edge of the coffee table. "I wanted to talk," I said, closing the book and setting it aside. He glanced at me briefly before looking away again. "I know things have been hard for both of us." He nodded. "They have, but, Mom, I don't want you to think I don't care. I do more than you know." He stopped, pacing, turning to face me fully. "I know you care," I said, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. "That's why this is so hard, because no matter how much I try to let go, no matter how much I tell myself to move on, I can't, Mom." He began, his voice soft, but filled with tension. But I held up a hand. "Let me finish," I said softly. "I've spent so much time trying to figure out what's wrong with me, why I feel this way. But the more I think about it, the more I realize it's not wrong to feel. Love is so, even if it doesn't fit the rules, even if it scares people." I swallowed hard, my own words striking something deep within me. "Love isn't wrong," I said carefully, "but sometimes acting on it is especially when it could hurt the people we care about." He nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer, but still needed to hear it. "I get that," he said quietly. "I do, but what am I supposed to do with these feelings? Bury them? Pretend they don't exist?" "No," I said finally, shaking my head. "You don't have to pretend, and I need to confess something too. I'm telling you this because I want to help you channel these feelings into something that helps you grow, not something that holds you back." Ethan sank into the chair across from me, his shoulders slumping. "That's easier said than done, Mom," he murmured. "But tell me, what do you have to confess?" "Well," I said softly, my heart pounding, "I think you might have already noticed for the last couple of nights while we were sleeping together for a moment." He didn't respond. Then, to my surprise, he let out a quiet, laughy touches. He asked, "Of course I noticed, but I told myself you did that to make me feel better. To be honest, they only make me feel lost. They make me feel so close to what I want, but yet so far away." Ethan said, his voice filled with quiet desperation. "You're not lost," I said, leaning forward, my tone soft but steady. "You're just finding your way, and that's okay. It's part of growing up." He looked at me, then his eyes brimming with vulnerability, and it made my chest ache. "I don't want to lose you, Mum," he said softly. "I can't lose you. You won't," I replied firmly, my voice unwavering. "No matter what, I'm here for you. That will never change." But even as I said the words, my heart pounded high in my chest. He didn't notice, but I was fighting a storm of emotions. I hadn't yet told him the truth, that those touches weren't only for his benefit, they were also because of what I wanted. Deep inside, I took a deep breath, deciding it was time to clear the air. Let me finish what I was going to say. I began Ethan those touches. They weren't just to make you feel good. They were because I felt something too. His breath caught, and his eyes widened slightly. That's what he asked, his voice uncertain. He felt something, I confessed. "In fact, I still feel something, Ethan. I've been scared to tell you because I'm your mom, and it's wrong. What we feel, it can't be true, but I can't deny what I'm feeling." He stayed silent for a moment, then leaned toward me, placing a hand lightly on my leg. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling, "we can't do this. What about Dad? We can." He whispered, his tone insistent but tinged with hesitation. "No one has to know." I saw the uncertainty in his eyes, and even though my heart screamed otherwise, I leaned in and kissed him intensely. But briefly, the kiss was electric, charged with emotions neither of us could fully process. But it didn't last. I pulled back my hand gently, pushing him away. "We can't," I said firmly, my voice breaking. "Let's just get a good night's rest and we'll talk about this tomorrow, okay?" He nodded, though the tension between us was far from gone. We went through our nighttime routines in near silence, while brushing our teeth and washing up. I caught his reflection in the mirror, and for a fleeting moment, I smiled at him. He returned a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I changed into my pajamas and crawled into bed, trying to steady my thoughts for weeks now. Ever since that first night of his confession, we had been sharing the same bed it had become. Our routine. A few moments later, Ethan entered the room. I opened the sheets for him, silently inviting him to join me as he slid under the covers. The tension between us was almost unbearable. I turned to him briefly. "Let Hun just rest?" I said softly. "We talk about everything tomorrow." He nodded again, but the weight of everything unspoken lingered in the air, heavy and unrelenting tomorrow before Dad returns. "Okay," I said softly. "All right," Ethan replied, his tone subdued, as though he had already resigned himself to the idea that nothing was going to happen, but I certainly hadn't. I turned off the nightlight and said, "Good night, honey," turning away from him. "Good night, Mom," he whispered in return. My mind raced minutes, felt like hours as I lay there, my thoughts spiraling in a whirlwind of emotions and doubts. At one point, my foot brushed against his leg, partly on purpose, partly by accident. He didn't pull away, and before I knew it, I found myself pulling him closer. He grabbed my leg gently, and I turned to face him. For a moment I hesitated, caught between the weight of everything we had been through and the undeniable pull I felt toward him. But then I let it happen. I kissed him, and it didn't stop there. We went further than kissing, surrendering to the emotions that had been simmering for weeks. I'm not going to go into detail about what happened, but I let myself go completely. At that moment, I felt alive for the first time in weeks, maybe even years. I was free of the doubts and fears that had consumed me. It didn't feel wrong or confusing. It felt like love, pure and simple love. The kind of love that had grown naturally between us over the years, rooted in care, trust, and understanding. That's what I told myself as we embraced the moment. But as quickly as it began, it ended. It was all too intense for him, and I could understand that when Ethan pulled back, he smiled at me, his expression soft and vulnerable. "We okay, right?" he asked. I nodded, then slipped out of bed and made my way to the bathroom. The weeks that followed were different in many ways. They were easier. Ethan seemed more at peace, more himself. His father had returned, and Ethan started spending more time outside, reconnecting with friends, and even picking up hobbies he'd abandoned over the past year. I threw myself into my routines, finding solace in the small, everyday tasks that kept life moving forward. But as much as I wanted to believe we were healing, the undercurrent of what had passed between us remained. It was like an invisible thread binding us together in a way neither of us could fully escape up. Until now, I haven't told my husband what happened, and Ethan and I haven't spoken about it either. I don't know what to do or how to process what's happened. What are your thoughts on this? I'm curious about how others might view what I've shared. It's crazy what happened, and I can't deny it. But more than anything, I can't turn back time.